Hi, everyone, and welcome to this incredibly, I don't know, for me, exciting panel about leading the human and AI workforce, which is, we discussed, is a topic that I think we're just starting to kind of like bring into the surface what it actually means to manage properly a workforce of both humans and AI tools and agents. And before we start, I do want to introduce a little bit. Some people here, I think, are first timers of in our community's content. So I just want to introduce very shortly the community, what we do, and then we'll jump right into the panel. So bear with me. I promise it won't take more than 3 minutes. So the Learning Table community, next, yes, okay, is basically a community for HR, L&D, talent, people who are working very hard to help their organization succeed, and usually alone or in a very small team. And that's where kind of like the community was born from really a need to bring people together, to learn from each other, to support each other, to build strong connections that can really support you throughout your journey, your professional journey. Our activities are mostly whether online. I think almost every week we have some kind of webinar or workshop or panel all around the topics that the community raised as top priorities for them. We also have a few hubs across the world with networking meetups and exclusive events for senior leaders, and a program for professional matchmaking, helping people connect with peers that can really support and help them. And all of this goodness is sponsored by Juno Journey. That's basically our community. So very briefly, what Juno Journey is, since most people never heard of it before. So basically, I do want to explain what we do, how we help our customers move from learning to workforce readiness. And what does that mean? I think everyone here in this session know how the world is changing basically really faster than organizations can really execute. And the real question for us is, where are we right now in supporting our employees with what they really need from us in this unbelievable change? And when we talk about our employees and what they're going through right now, just a few things to consider. Think about the average skill tenure, how it reduced dramatically from years to almost nothing, which basically means they need to continuously upskill and reskill almost every day. Think about the number of new business applications that we're now using that just keeps on growing. And we want to see business value coming out of them. That means a lot of application training. And if that keeps training, think about our own products. We as companies can now deliver much faster, which means the knowledge for our people is changing continuously. In a nutshell, they really need our help. But most L&D and HR teams are pretty much still stuck in the operational phase because that shift internally hasn't changed, rather than really supporting their people and preparing the workforce readiness. Things like, can you send me a report or manually update this training, or things that really take too much time, and that's not really doing the strategic workforce readiness. And that's exactly where we step in. So Juno supports hundreds of companies with their workforce readiness efforts in the humane era. We connect human strategy with automated execution orchestrated by Juno, who understands your company focus, your department goals, and your employee capabilities. And she doesn't work by herself. She has a team of agents. Each and every one of them is focusing on a specific aspect of your employee workforce readiness, from onboarding, manager enablement, compliance, knowledge enablement, priority-driven upskilling, and career management. We do it through two main models: the Juno Training, which is AI-powered LMS that automates back-end admin and takes care of content creation, real-time knowledge grabbing, verifying training understanding, and automating workflows by company focus. And we have the Juno Growth, which is a goal-driven LXP that turns performance goals into personalized development plans, creating career journeys, and automating learning budget management. If it's okay with you, I'll take 30 seconds to just show you very briefly our agents, how they do it. It's literally 30 seconds each, and then we're diving in. So I really appreciate your. So this is Jaden. He's basically the creator of content for you. So you can upload anything you need. We also sync with your internal systems. And then you can ask him for any type of training or content that you need to create, and he does it for you. With agents that can check knowledge understanding, build an automated workflow for you. Everything works super streamlined and easy to use. So you don't need to do all the heavy lifting yourself by manually creating and updating trainings. I apologize. Okay. So this is Jaden, and the next one is Gemma. So I'm gonna also mute. Thank you. So Gemma is basically connected to the performance goals you manage in your performance systems. But what she does is understand who you are, what's your timeline, what are your performance goals, and she literally creates an actionable plan that has a step-by-step actions you should take, tasks you should do, content you should learn. It finds mentors for you to really make sure that you can execute the plan and you can take your skills to the next level to really perform better and grow. So that was Juno in a very short nutshell. And now let's move on to our incredible panel, as we want to talk about leading the human and AI workforce. So I'm just going to shortly introduce the lovely ladies in our panel. I'm going to start with Malvika Jethmalani, who is a 3-time CHRO, executive coach, and founder of Atvis Group, where she advises CEOs and boards on leadership, transformation, and building future-ready organizations in the age of AI. She's also the founder of Women Shaping AI, a community empowering women to shape the future of AI. She's an advisor to AI leadership platforms and she contributes through Leader on the future of work. Next, we have Cynthia Abbott Kerr, if I said that correctly. Kerr? Yeah, okay. The founder and CEO of WellPay AI, where she is redefining how organizations approach compensation through AI-driven, data-backed decisions. With a strong background as a senior HR executive, she brings deep expertise in total rewards, people operations, and building scalable, transparent compensation strategies across global organizations. That was a mouthful. I'm very proud of myself. And lastly, we have the brilliant Ali Uren, the founder of Kickstart. Yeah, okay. And creator of the Circle Workplace, which is a model helping organizations turn everyday team experience into measurable business impact. She has over 15 years of global experience working with leaders to build self-reliant teams that don't just learn, but continuously convert insight, risk, and real work into capability and outcomes. So I think without further ado, we can actually start the panel. I feel like I spoke so much. I'm going to speak just a little bit more, and then I'm going to give the stage to our lovely panel. So I think if we kind of start with why we're here today, over the past year, something really fundamental changed in how work really gets done. Not because of AI tools, but because of what those tools turned into. And today, employees are not just using AI, they're working with it, just like teammates. And in some companies, managers are already leading teams that include AI employees. In others, people are overseeing AI agents doing real work. That's their full-time job. So this is no longer just about adopting new tools. This is a shift that's pretty much already happening. And the real question we want to focus on is, do we actually know how to operate in this new reality? And how to build the required systems and work redesign that our organizations really need right now? And that's what our panel is going to focus on. I do want to ask each and every one of you, as we continue with our panel, if you have questions, you can jump in, you can raise hand, you can use the chat, you can use the Q&A area. This is not just about us talking, this is really about a community. So I really invite each and every one of you to jump in, share, add whatever you need. So Malvika, I'm going to start with the first question to you. This is just a question I'm going to ask each and every one of you, and I want you to start. But just to get things kind of like starting, in one sentence, this is for each one of you, what's the biggest shift that you're seeing right now in how work gets done with AI? Malvika.
Yeah, I would describe this shift as we've gone from using AI as a tool to integrating AI into workflows. And if you look at Deloitte's latest report, their Human Capital Trends report, they call this a tipping point because they describe the advantage as no longer having technology. Access to technology has been democratized. It's about designing great human-machine collaboration. So that's how I would describe this shift.
Thank you very much. Ali?
Okay, I've moved closer to my microphone, so hopefully you can hear me a little bit better. For me, it's about everyone being a context creator. So how we're using context in business, and then repurposing and using that back in to actually create something useful with AI is probably one of the biggest changes that I'm seeing in my space. So how we're using context and making sense of it is very different now.
Thank you. Cynthia, one sentence that you're seeing right now?
What I'm seeing is a very direct and forward motion around how we use AI. So when I first started WellPay, there was questions around, should we use AI in compensation analysis? What does that look like? And now, the first few sentences into a conversation, it's how are we using AI? How does your company bring it forward? I think that, our colleagues in our workforce have gotten smarter, which is fantastic. And so you're no longer explaining, hey, we use artificial intelligence. The questions are around how do you use artificial intelligence?
And I hope we can touch that today. Thank you. So Malvika, I'm gonna start with a question directed to you. Since we're basically past the AI is coming phase, in many organizations, people are really already working with AI agents, and sometimes even without even calling them that. From what you're seeing on the ground, what has actually changed in how work gets done?
Yeah, so you make a great point, which is at times people are working with agentic AI without even calling it that. So I want to take a quick moment to talk about what exactly do we mean when we talk about agents or agentic AI. So you have things like automation or RPA bots, like robotic process automation bots. These are automated bots that can handle simple tasks. When this happens, do this, right? Uh, they require little they do require prompting to answer, but they are very simple bots to automate simple tasks. Then you have co-pilots like ChatGPT, Claude, etc. Then you have agentic workflows. So agentic workflows are structured, multi-step, and often deterministic processes where LLMs are orchestrated to execute sort of predefined tasks, and they offer higher reliability because they are often deterministic. So what I mean by deterministic is when this happens, do this. When employees' compensation hits X level, use Y tax rate. And then you have agents. So agents can engage in goal setting, planning, and multi-step execution with minimal human prompting or intervention. And so they're not returning a sort of single turn response. They're executing multi-step workflows. So what is fundamentally changed is I don't think AI is sitting at the edge of work anymore. Like we said, it's moving into the middle of workflow. So I think there's three shifts that are happening. First, work is becoming multi-step and agent-driven. So we're starting to think about roles as collections of tasks and responsibilities. and how we can tap into the collective wisdom of human agent teams to execute those tasks. And AI has gone from generating outputs like help me draft this email to planning, executing, and iterating across tasks. The second is the unit of productivity is shifting. It's no longer the individual contributor, it's the human plus the system of agents that they're working with. And the third thing I'll say is decision making is becoming more distributed. So when you have artificial intelligence and agents embedded into your workflows, you are now automatically ceding agency, at least to some extent, and handing over delegating thinking and decision making to those intelligent systems. And I think that's where leaders are underestimating the operating model overhaul that's required.
Thank you very much. Okay. And Cynthia, my next question is for you. You sit right at the intersection of AI and decisions that directly impact people, like pay and equity and rewards. Where are you seeing AI influence decisions and in ways that really change the stacks for organizations?
Yeah, I think it's actually a point that Malvika made. What we're seeing is greater access to collaboration. It doesn't take, especially in compensation, there was a time when it would take months to get to data that you could make decisions with. And that's not the case now. You can have information in relatively quick order, which then means you have to really move into a space of leadership. I think the biggest skill that we're going to need going forward is actually leadership, that you're going to have to operate more like a general manager because technology has been democratized, because there's so much access to information. You're going to have to be able to zoom in and make decisions. But I think it's that we have allowed greater levels of collaboration, especially around compensation and pay. It's no longer siloed to maybe one team or one decision maker. You have access to information and can pull others in to make the necessary decisions for outcomes.
From your experience right now, like where do you see the biggest impact of that shift? It's very interesting. Like where do you see that value really coming into play?
The value I would say is in getting really clear around what's happening in the market, right? We know from a compensation space that not all jobs are created equal when we think about supply and demand and we think about pay structures. And the value is getting a lot of clarity around where we need to compensate certain roles to remain competitive, and we can see what roles are moving quickly in the market or not. And companies are really looking to have that competitive advantage. I have a lot of conversations. I have at least 3 conversations a week around, are we paying appropriately for the roles relevant to market?
And that is a big shift since AI was there. Wasn't that something
Well,
before?
I think prior to artificial intelligence being really ingratiated in the conversation, there was a lot more general concepts applied to compensation.
Mhm.
And I'm sure, Malvika could tap into this as well, being CHRO, that we had more of this is generally how we approach, this is our comp philosophy at large. And what I'm seeing now with artificial intelligence is companies getting very specific and very drilled down into either specific jobs or specific job families, depending on how the market's moving.
I couldn't agree more, Cynthia. What I will add to that, and I think this is true not just for compensation, but in general, I think because the volume and pace of change only continues to accelerate, companies and therefore leaders are wanting to move at light speed. They want to move super quickly, which means they want information now. So in the past, when you took on, a compensation project, I mean, as a CHRO, if I started a compensation project, I would expect it to take minimum 6 months and up to 12 months, right? Whereas now the expectation is we're going to have access to real-time data, we're going to have access to data faster, and therefore make decisions faster. So you have to be more nimble and more agile. And again, this is a theme that Deloitte has covered recently as well, because most of your competitors are going to have access to the same or even better technology at times. So your competitive advantage comes from being more nimble and more agile as a business.
Thank you. That's great. Okay, Ali, your turn. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, perfect. One, I think, of the most interesting data points we're seeing is that most AI capability is being built outside the organization. And this is where we start seeing things like inconsistency and risk exposure and what you would call like a digital brain drain. What
Mm.
risk does that create, not just for individuals, but really for businesses?
Yeah, sure. And I know that Malvika shared a great report that sort of kicked this off, that EY did around agentic employee use in the US. And I'm sure Malvika can share that report, but it was saying that 85% of workers are learning how to use agentic agents outside of work. So there's a lot of risks with that, yeah? So there's obviously inconsistency with what's being produced. So in terms of quality and standards, so how are people using it? There's no real traceability around how decisions are being made, what people are doing with that as well too. So there is a lack of visibility. I think also too, when it's not embedded and connected back to the daily workflow, is that it's not really developed, right? So it's hard to make it stick. So I think for me, what is not used every day or embedded back into the role or a project specifically doesn't really get developed to that next level. So you don't get to really learn the craft. You're not playing and experimenting all the time back in with real world, scenarios. So it's hard to build that confidence. And of course, too, there's the risk around lack of guardrails. How do we use this responsibly? Are people using it in ways where they're sharing data or creating something that is not in line and puts the organisation and the people at risk through maybe either financial loss, reputational damage as well. And of course, too, we are seeing what I call that digital brain drain, where people are not coming back and actually sharing that intelligence asset in a way that can lead to new economic outcomes and growth for other people. So we're still stuck in that real me mindset that comes with traditional, sometimes skill development, rather than the collective benefit of the we. So I think it certainly runs right through from being able to deliver quality, being able to build reputation, being able to work safely and responsibly. And I think it leads to a continuing disconnect as well, that people are already feeling, in their role, because it's not being mapped back to the day-to-day reality. So I actually think that the risks and threats of what could look quite innocent of people just, learning and playing outside. Yeah. And I think we need to have that. But it's the role of the leader as a facilitator to help bring that back and to make it land somewhere where it can create measurable, durable outcomes and impact.
Nice. Are there maybe some tips, since most people here are probably from the HR or L&D or talent space, tips that you can give maybe to how to I wouldn't say make the risk go away, but maybe reduce that tension and help the organization change that?
I think it starts with the relationships that we're having as well too. So how are we actually redesigning the roles? And I'll address this elsewhere and it might come up, but I definitely think there's a few things we need to do. We need to actually embed this into the way in which we design roles and bring it out into the light and have a conversation around it, right? Because people probably get quite fearful too, thinking if I get caught out, playing with this, I want to keep ahead. The organisation isn't, supporting me. I've got to take charge of it myself. So I think by making it part of the role, by being able to measure it, by making space and time to actually talk about what are you learning? Like, what are you building? What are you creating? How do we share that? How can that have greater benefit than just staying with you? But it does always start with how we're designing the roles and how those roles then connect back in to team and project, HR strategy, and then that broader overarching organisational strategy. So as I said, we don't have a lot of time, but if I was to say, where would I start to be able to make sure that we can start to connect that and leverage those lessons and experiences, that's where I'd start.
Nice. Well, easy.
Easy. That's okay. Come and talk to me. That's why we're here, and I'm here in the middle of the night having this conversation with you.
If you didn't catch Ali's accent, she's currently in Australia, joining us at 2:30, I think, in the morning. So kudos for Ali. So I think she'll answer any message anytime. Thank you so much, Ali. Malvika, I'm gonna refer my next question to you. If people are already working with and sometimes even managing AI agents, what are basically new leadership skills you think we need that most organizations are just not building today?
I think one of the obvious capabilities or skills that you need is understanding how to manage human agent systems. So that's things like workflow design, designing the right decision rights, veto power, delegation authority, etc., for the agents. Because we are now in a world where agents are not just responding to human inquiries, right? They are completing multi-step tasks and workflows. They are making recommendations, and increasingly they are going to inform decisions. So what that means is leaders need to understand how to use Ali's point about facilitation skills, right? How to facilitate the human agent interaction. So just to kind of give you an example and make it real, let's say you have two peers who are both using their own agents to do their work and support their work. And these two peers have conflicting metrics, which we often see, right? In our organizations, people have conflicting priorities, conflicting metrics. Well, their agents are going to be optimized for those metrics. And so those agents may very well come up with conflicting recommendations. And so then it's on the manager to design the right decision rights, veto power, et cetera, to be that facilitator and that tiebreaker. So in a situation like that, the leader, the manager needs to exercise sound judgment because we now have more data, not less. And we have conflicting recommendations from two different agents optimized for two different conflicting metrics. So those are situations where leadership is going to need to exercise that judgment. So judgment becomes really important in a world like that. And the last thing I'll say is meta learning. So learning how to learn is going to be a very important skill. If you just look at everything that's happened in the last 5 to 6 years, a global pandemic, geopolitical tension, wars, climate disasters, etc. Now we have AI. Tomorrow we might have quantum computing. So that disruption continues to change, but that need to learn and to adapt is going to stay constant. It's going to be a durable skill, as Ali likes to say. So learning how to learn is going to be one of the most important skills we can work on.
Interesting. What do you feel about just something that came up? I heard people speaking about that basically if you're an IC and you wanna grow into leading people, now basically we can say start by managing agents, and that's like a step to grow from to managing people. Do you feel like this could be something that can help people kind of like prove their impact, create more value before, and kind of like grow their capabilities as leaders?
I think the reason we're having these conversations of people are going to manage agents before they can manage actual humans is because many employees are already managing AI before they manage a person, right? So they're delegating work to AI, they're evaluating the outputs of the AI, they're iterating on the results. And that if you think about it, that's it's not the same as managing humans because there's so much more to humans than that, and you have to manage the whole person. But there's pretty significant overlap, right? You need to know how to clearly communicate a vision and goals. You need to know how to clearly set deadlines and communicate what needs to be done and by when, and with whom your agent needs to collaborate and which tools it needs to call. And you need to design workflows for your agent to go and execute those workflows. You need to learn and iterate and communicate across teams and at times even manage multi-agent systems or as some like to call them, swarms of agents. So there is significant overlap, and it may be a good training ground for people to learn some of those skills. A lot of how we communicate with AI helps us hone our communication skills, right? Because AI doesn't have a lot of the context that we have as humans, so we have to be crystal clear. And communication is a very important leadership skill that you need in managing humans. So why not use agents as a learning ground or a training ground to help people develop some of those skills like communication, like org design, workflow design, operating model design, et cetera, before they can graduate to the next level. In the past, we've promoted people to leadership positions without giving them little to no training, support, and real world exposure. This may be a way to close some of that gap that we've had in the past.
That's super interesting. Thank you so much. Cynthia, let's talk a little bit about, like we spoke about trust a little bit and accountability. So when AI starts influencing decisions that are affecting people's careers, right? Their career, their pay, their performance, we're basically not talking anymore about tools. We're talking about decisions that really impact people's lives. What do you think has to be true for employees to actually trust those outcomes? Where might the risks there come to life, and how can we avoid them?
I think, first of all, it's a really great question. Second, I think it ties into also, a lot of what Ali was saying, that we have to have frameworks and trust. We have to have explanation as to how and why we've trained these models, right? So that we know and can rely and trust the information that's coming back to us. That's why when working with clients, I'll say, you can't take an open source GPT and think it's going to give you good compensation recommendations, right? I have a honed, trained, autonomous AI company that I've been training for 7 years before I started my business, because this has to be so accurate, right? And you have to be able to communicate that trust. I think it's also the foundation of what we've been trying to do in the people and culture space for a number of years, communicating EVP, communicating our compensation philosophies, whether that was around pay transparency, how the organization paid to market. So we've been trying to lay that trust groundwork for a long time. And I think the part two of that is adding in artificial intelligence and then communicating the ways, one, we work with that AI, and two, how we have trained and inserted information into that AI so we can then trust the outcome.
Yeah. Where does it usually break? Like, where do you think are the most, I would say, sensitive points for us to focus on?
I think it's Malvika's point around communication, right? The old phrase, junk in, junk out. If you're not abundantly clear with artificial intelligence, with what you want it to do, with where you're looking for insights, resourcing, or help, it's going to give you it's going to give you a murky answer for the murky information you put in. So I think that, a lot of clarity and communication is going to be the expected norm going forward, given that we have so many tools that can help us produce outcomes. Malvika said it best, when you undertook a comp project, it used to take 6 months to a year. Now we know we can cut down on that time. That being said, you have to be abundantly clear with what you're saying to these tools so that you can get clarity in response.
Clue, can I just say something on the end of that? Because to be able to do any of this, then we're going to have to get very good at doing something that leaders don't tend to do. And that is managing and being proactive around ambiguity.
Yes.
So ambiguity, you can't remove every source of ambiguity, but there's many that you can. And I think we need to start looking at how we're nurturing, responding to ever evolving, because like Malvika said, you don't even know what's coming up next week. So we need to have means and ways of making ambiguity part of the discussion to be able to find the solution. And only when can we start to take out that ambiguity are we able to then really create that context in its holistic fashion. So ambiguity does affect people physically and mentally as much as it does performance. So I just wanted to flag that with people to think about. Where are those sources of ambiguity that I'm able to start to remove, and do I even know what that reality looks like, and how can I start to have that conversation.
Thank you. I think I saw Jason wrote a question in the QA, and maybe I can stop my questions and allow him to ask his. Jason, can you unmute yourself? Do you need me to do it? Let's see. I think Jason is, you should be able to. I think maybe, no, okay. Allowed to talk. Sorry. Jason, can you talk now?
Now I can. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Well,
Go ahead.
this is dangerous. This is dangerous because it's such a great conversation. I have so much that I want to talk about. But I think the question that I sent is really about this concept of us not being able to really comprehend, or leaders not being able to comprehend what a disruptor AI is. And I'm running into this with conversations that I have, that a lot of leaders are still trying to see this as just another tool versus what a game changer it is. And so one of the things that I'm big on is that we have to redefine all the roles from individual contributors up. And that I think people are starting to understand that, okay, we need leaders to have discernment and to have have the skills we talked about. Thank you for adding again, Malvika, the creative thinking. These are the skills that we need to have, but not just in our leaders. We need our individual contributors to do this, because we're in a position now that there's no such thing as an individual contributor. Everybody is in some form or another leading AI. So we need discernment. We need creative thinking, critical thinking skills across the board. But when we start talking about redefining these roles, there's a lot of pushback and a lot of fear of that. So what are some best practices as the panel that you found to help change this hesitancy, and how we can help get buy-in for the need to change these roles?
Anyone wants to? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big question. I will attempt to answer it at least in part, but I would love to hear what others have to say as well. Not just Ali and Cynthia, but others who are listening in the chat. Please share your thoughts. So, first of all, I think it starts at the top. I think it's important that the leadership team is exhibiting and role modeling the right behaviors that they seek in everyone else. So when I go into organizations and I hear CEOs and the executive team talking about AI adoption, but I don't see them adopting AI themselves, that to me is a red flag. So if they haven't been in the tools, if they haven't rolled up their sleeves and gotten their hands dirty, that's where we start. I think a really good example of this is Zapier. They had an all hands meeting recently where everyone on the executive team showed off to the company their recent automations or AI agents that they had built. So I think that's one thing that helps with the hesitation. The second thing I'll say is when something feels like an IT initiative or an HR initiative, or someone's pushing us to adopt this AI thing, it almost always feels like extra work, right? But when your peers are doing it and it's more of a pull versus a push, and you see your peers going, hey, I saved X number of hours by simplifying my work by using this agent, or I simplified this workflow, or I'm serving customers better by using AI, then suddenly you're paying attention. You want to know what they're doing, right? And so what I would say there is social learning is still one of the most powerful tools that we have. We as humans have, from the dawn of time, learned from each other, right? And so I think it's important to leverage that and to use social learning as a catalyzer to enhance your AI adoption. And then the last thing I'll say is when I go into organizations and I interview employees, one of the most common obstacles that I hear about is I am drowning in work, I'm burnt out, And now my company wants me to learn this new AI thing, and they want me to learn how to build agents on top of an already never-ending to-do list. And when am I supposed to do this, right? And the irony is we're trying to ask people to figure out how to use a technology that's going to make them less burnt out or save them time, but they don't have time to learn that technology. So I think the best organizations are creating the time and the space inside the company within business hours to encourage people to learn this new technology so that it doesn't feel like something additional that they have to do on evenings and weekends. Ali cited that stat earlier from the EY report, right, that showed that 85% of employees who are working with agentic AI are learning how to do so outside of work. 83% of employees say that their knowledge about agentic AI is all self-taught. And that is something that we do have control over within our organizations. We can create the time and the space for people to have that learning inside the business. And by the way, that will also prevent shadow AI and a lot of privacy and security risks. So those are my thoughts, but I'd love to hear from others.
Can I just say, and Malvika, there's a lot in that as well too. Of course, it depends on where the pushback is coming from, like in terms of how I would be responding to that. But a couple of key things just at sort of a higher level. Certainly the earlier buy-in that we can get, we know we're going to get less pushback, right? So how do I involve people in this? Malvika alluded to it. People always panic. People always want to know what's in it for me. What is the benefit? And that doesn't matter whether or not it's going to be the CEO or anyone else in the team. Everyone wants to know, what does this actually mean for me, and some actual specifics. Definitely allowing people to help design the role is critical, and how it's going to be measured, not just what's in it, but what does great look like and how do we assess it moving forward. And the other thing too, I just want to say, I know we've got a lot of, there's a lot to cover, but I think also too, understanding that it's an evolving piece. And if we want people to come and join us, we must be explicit, not think that people will understand what we're saying, but exactly how are we going to support you in this journey, in this trip? What does that look like, right? So we actually have to be proactive. And the more we know our people, we know what they're going to be concerned about. We know what they're going to be fearful of. So we need to be able to be constructive with that, to be able to actually come forward and say, hey, I know this is how you're feeling. Let's talk about that. But hey, this is what we're going to also put in place so that you can actually have a very positive experience with this. And this is how we're going to support you. So on the back, and I'll be quiet in a minute, on what Cynthia said, we're not just looking at the EVP, we're looking at the EEVP. And you're like, what is that? That is the employee emotional value proposition. So that is the commitment that you make to say, when you come and work with us in this way, this is how we want you to think and feel and engage and contribute. So not just the EVP, that's still there, but going another step further and looking at the emotional environment and reality that we want to create. And then when we understand that, then we can design the roles accordingly.
Thank you so much. Jason, anything you want to add before? Yeah?
Well, I appreciate this, and I think these are great best practices for helping, especially for helping people into the adoption. And I loved the comment about the shadow AI and why we need to prepare people for the usage of AI. If we could come up a couple thousand feet from a more strategic piece, is that I think a mistake we sometimes make in organizations is, those of us in L&D, we come in and we say, okay, we're going to start adding these skills, rather than taking a look at what the definition of the role is and what the role should be, because we really need to take a look at these and say, okay, yes, these are now what the roles entail, and these are the skill sets that entail and the experiences that they entail, because that not only affects what we do when we're onboarding and for continuous learning, it also affects how we're hiring, the skills that we're looking for, these pieces. And it's really that piece of, let's start redefining roles. And a lot of this is the flattening of the organization, where instead of going up, we're going sideways with more of the lattice approach. And several members of these panels, I guess I'm a fanboy. I've been following a lot of you have said this, is that it's now more like lily pads. We're hopping to different roles. So we need to redefine what these skill sets are and what we need to be enhancing and helping people develop. And it's that more strategic piece where I'm finding the roadblocks of, no, we don't need to redefine because it's not, we're just looking at tools here. Is how do we change that mindset of the role is the role, it's not going to change, versus we need to completely redefine the roles instead of just identifying what to add on to quote unquote the traditional role.
Mm-hmm. And I think also too, just on the back of that, if I can say, what we need to do before I get to your answering your other question,
Sure.
is that we need to be disciplined in actually removing things from roles as well. So
Yes.
I'm no mathematician, but I do have a pretty simple equation. If you want to add, then you must take something out. And so we need to get very clear on actually what is high value work now. And I would be involving, if people are pushing back on that, those people that are pushing back, again, it must connect back into the strategic vision of the organisation. I would be getting them involved in what is high value work now. Come from a different way, yeah? Getting them to say, what is that then against the plan, right? Because you've got to embed it back into something. How do those roles actually, fulfill that? And I think we need to start with that high value work piece as well. And I think they need to be certainly educated on no organisation works in isolation, right? So this is a bigger piece. This is bigger than the organisation. This is about what's happening at a state, at a national, at a global level. And I would always be mapping it back. The role must be mapped back to the actual strategic goals of the organisation. And I would start to look at, through that process, where those gaps are. But it's a facilitated process. You can't come in trying to shove a square peg in a round hole. It's actually facilitated so that through that process, those decision makers that pushed back actually going to start to discover the answer themselves. It's not simple, but that's where I'd be going with that.
Cynthia, I see that you wrote something about role bloat. Is there anything you want to add on?
Yeah, I think it ties into compensation in a lot of ways, right? When organizations say we don't know if we're paying appropriately, we don't know if we have jobs in the correct level. And one of the questions that I always ask is, and much to Allie's point, what is critical? What do we need the role to do? What is this role? What's the impact? What's it actually doing? Sometimes when organizations go through change, and as humans, to Allie's point, we can feel petty or we can panic. All of a sudden you start adding 3 and 4 and 5 jobs onto a person when really you have to dissect. I think that the future of work is going to require us to really think critically about what makes sense, what are we doing, what contributions is this role making, what critical piece of the business is it touching, that this kind of hazy, murky, I hired you for one thing, but you're doing 6 others. People aren't really going to stand for that anymore, because then there's going to be questions around, where am I paid appropriately for the job I'm doing? Well, we don't know, because we don't know the job you're doing, right? This kind of hazy, just come in. I think I'm resonating with Allie right here. This kind of hazy, just come in and get it done. People want a lot of clarity, and as they should, right? We to Malvika's point, information has been heavily democratized. And when I talk to companies, a lot of the push for them to organize their compensation strategies and structures is that their workforce is saying, hey, we really want to understand what's going on. And I think that technology is going to push us in a space of being abundantly clear. One, to Malvika's point, so we don't get junk in, junk out. And 2, to Allie's point, because people want to understand, what is it that I'm doing? What is it that I'm being asked to do? And is this critical? Because we've all been given tasky, junky, clunky things throughout our careers. And when you look at it now, you're like, hey, we could bring in an AI to do this. Do you really need me to sit here and answer these basic ticket questions? No, there's no actual value here. I think AI is going to allow us to unlock humans for really strong, creative, capable things, and get rid of a lot of the tasky things that used to weight us down.
Yeah, thanks for that, Cynthia. And I hope you're right about where our focus starts going. And in hearing what you're talking about, I think I think I kind of answered my own, or you helped me answer the question in my head, is that we need to stop talking roles and start looking more skills based. And that would include pay, right? So we compensate for skills versus roles because, to your point, roles don't mean much anymore.
Yeah, what I would add to that, and Jason, given what you're talking about, you might want to check out Microsoft's report from last year called the Work Trend Index, if you haven't done so already. In that report, they discuss this idea of we are moving from the world of the org chart to a new world of the work chart. So an org chart, which is the traditional structure of boxes and wires, is based on hierarchies and an old way of working, right? Whereas they talk about this idea of the work chart, which is really designed around the work that needs to get done in an organization in order to move its strategic objectives and its business outcomes forward. And so it's designed around specific outcomes. And the example that they give is, think about when you're making a movie, you bring together experts from various domains, right? Editors, directors, etc., teams of hundreds of people, and you come together to work on the project, and the team disbands once the project is done. And we will increasingly find ourselves in that type of world where work is being organized around the work that needs to get done and the skills that need to do that work, rather than the hierarchy of boxes and wires that we've seen in the past. So the report goes into much more detail about it. I'm not doing it justice, but you might find this idea of the work chart very interesting as you think about the skills-based revolution that you want to bring to your organization.
Thank you. I see that someone shared the link to the Microsoft research or document that you shared. And I also see that we have Martin Griffin that also shared. Maybe you want to share out loud what you wrote? Maybe I need to allow you to do it. We do have like last 5 minutes, but if there's any chance to hear you, Martin, I do want to allow you to talk. If you wish, you can. Would like? Yes? No? Okay, maybe not. Okay, so if you want to add anything. Oh, audio is not possible right now. Okay, no worries. Well, thanks for trying. We do have last 5 minutes, so I want to take us to maybe kind of like last question that I would love to hear from the panelists. Jason, next time I'm just gonna ask you to write all the questions for my panel, so because you're so good at it. But really, thank you so much for creating this really interesting conversation here. And we have Hannah. Yay, you're raising your hand. Do I need to allow you to talk, Hannah? Let's see. Yes, I do. You're allowed to talk, Hannah.
Great. Now, I will admit I haven't fully formulated this question, but a lot of our discussion has really centered on this view of a very AI-focused organizations, companies that want to be at the forefront, and it's about getting them to that vision. But at least for my reality and just having worked across Fortune, let's say Fortune 100, there are so many laggards. And in the view of leadership, I'm sure that having most of the employees using, a co-pilot and, writing their own agents is pretty much what they see as success. And in this, I want to set aside, engineering functions and other functions that are very ripe for a specific type of AI use. So let's think about employees at large. I'm interested in the HR practitioners on this call. When you sit inside an organization like this, what do you see as your mandate? Are you looking to kind of shift the perspective of leadership to be more aligned with the kind of organizations we've been discussing on this call, which is very future focused? Or do you see success as driving adoption to the vision of leadership as best possible and then moving a little bit more slowly? I could see that if I took this conversation that we've had today to some of my clients in the past or the organization I'm at now, it would certainly be quite a distance, far more future focused than I think what they're envisioning today. And I'm curious how you how you navigate that or whether you navigate that.
Great question. If anyone wants to add their answer, who's not from the panel, of course, you're more than welcome. If you can't unmute yourself, raise a hand. Malvika?
Yeah, so again, I would be interested in hearing other people's perspectives on this as well. But how I would think about it is, I think first of all, we should we need to stop thinking about AI as an IT thing or as an HR thing or as the COO thing or something that the chief transformation officer is leading and start thinking about it as the cross-functional endeavor that it is. So where I would start in an organization like that, if I were the CHRO, for example, is I would talk to the CFO or the chief strategy officer or the COO, and I would want to understand what are they seeing in the market, because I would want to know that they are on top of it and they are seeing the market trends that I'm seeing as well. And if they are in fact seeing that competitors or other organizations in your space, in this space, are adopting AI at a faster rate than my organization, then I would want to raise that as a risk to the company's competitive edge and as a risk for the company's future. And so when I encounter very risk averse organizations, and like law firms are a good example of that, they tend to be very risk averse. I try to frame the problem as, okay, well, what is the risk of not doing anything? Because there's also risk in not taking action, right? So if you're competing with other law firms that are adopting AI, that are farther along on this curve, then what do you risk by losing that? What do you risk by not rethinking your billable hours model, your business model? And what do you risk by not serving your customers better? Are your customers looking, are you in an industry where your customers are looking for that AI advantage? Like Cynthia said earlier, right? The conversation is no longer, are you using AI? Customers are starting to ask earlier in the cycle, how are you using AI? How are you going to bring those insights to bear to and inform the work that you're doing? So I would think about it from a competitive advantage perspective, and I would think about it from a customer perspective. Are we not serving our customers in the best way possible because we're not adopting AI? And this is where I think HR leaders should be business leader first and HR leader second. This is where our business acumen can really shine. So I'll stop there and would love to hear from others.
I love that. Cynthia, anything you want to add? You kind of threw in not making a decision is a decision. Anything you want to? You just
Yeah.
been writing to only the panelists, so I want to make sure.
Oh, I'm so
everybody
sorry.
knows.
I turned it to everyone. Yes, just plus one to what Malvika had shared, that, sometimes we can think that not making a choice is less of a risk when really not making a choice is a choice. And that while there is risk in everything, there's pretty good data that shows companies that do not lean into adoption and tools and technology will be left behind, right? It kind of, this is the second technology revolution of our lifetime, right? The internet came out we really came on the scene for wide use in the mid 90s. And there were a lot of people who were naysayers and a lot of people who were, adopters, and the adopters continued to grow and expand, and the naysayers did not flourish. I always use the example of, because I used to drive by this facility when I lived in San Jose. I remember in the 90s, there was an article in a newspaper where I'm from, mid-sized town, and it was talking about how there was this really just outlandish person who thought he was going to live in his house in San Jose, California, and sell other people's used things on the internet. And how wild was that? Who would ever want to do that? And I share that because you're thinking, okay, what's this got to do with anything? eBay still has that house. eBay uses that house now for happy hours and employee connection. And eBay is now a massive facility in San Jose. So I say that because everything is kooky and wild until it's not.
That's awesome. This is great. Unfortunately, we're already 2 minutes past our end time. So obviously, if anyone needs to drop off, we completely respect your time. I'll send the recording and the summary and the contact information with our panelists for everyone. And if you do have one last minute, I do want to ask our panel just one last tiny question, short answer, just to sum things up. If you had to prioritize just one thing for the next 6 months, what do you think HR and L&D leaders should really focus on to prepare that human and AI workforce? Just one little thing. Ali.
Yeah, one little thing, get the roles, start to get the relationship around the roles and how we want to design those and assess them. Spend time on understanding that and get that in order as well too. So that's where I've been bedding that down. And I know it might not take 6 months, but it might. But everything else comes out of that because that's your compass. So understand that and making sure that's relevant and meaningful and can keep pace.
Thank you. Malvika.
I would say pick one workflow and redesign it end to end for human and AI collaboration. Don't treat it as a pilot. Do a full redesign of roles, decision rights, escalation paths, metrics, and that's how you're going to move from this pilot purgatory to actual business outcomes.
Thank you. Cynthia.
I would say communication. Get really clear on how you're going to communicate with each other and have clear communication standards for interacting with your AI.
Incredible. I want to deeply thank each and every one of you. I kind of wish we had another hour, but okay, this is what we have. I really appreciate your insights and your time. This was a very interesting conversation. I don't think it's as futuristic as Hannah said. I think we're already there. We're just not realizing where we are. And so this is extremely interesting and valuable. And everyone who came, thank you so much for coming in, for writing, for asking, for being part of this conversation. I'm going to share more events that we have coming up. Everything is super interesting with incredible leaders just like we had today. So I hope to see you again and again. And thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you
day.
all. Be well.
Thank you. Bye.